Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the podcast Strikes Back. My name is George, and you're listening to a very, very special episode. I'm joined by some really, really talented guys here. They've worked on some pretty amazing productions, stuff like Pacific Rim Uprising, Alien Covenant, Superman Returns, The Matrix Revolutions, some really heavy-hitting stuff. So this is going to be a really fun episode. I'm really pleased to be joined by Charlie Revai, Art Director, Dane Hallett, artist, and Matthew Hatton, artist.
Hello, hello.
So guys, thank you so much for being here. It's a great honor to have you guys on the podcast.
Thanks for inviting us, man.
Pleasure.
So, you know, one of the first things I want to talk about is some of the films you guys have worked on. As I said before, some really heavy-hitting films and films that we've covered on the podcast. And I'd love to know a bit more about everyone's role and how does a project like that start? Like, what happens? Somebody calls you on the phone. Hey, you working on Alien Covenant? Like, what is that whole process? How does that whole process go about?
It's Charlie calling
Charlie's
us.
first.
So it does kind of work like that.
Yeah, someone calls me first though.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you're the guy with the connections.
Not necessarily. Next guy on the rack sometimes. But I'll try and put together a team as best I can. So
Great.
end up with a lot of contacts and get to meet a lot of people.
Yeah, fantastic. So that call comes from the States, and then what is the scope of the team that you need to put together for something like Covenant?
Well, on Covenant, I was only one of the art directors. So there was a supervisor above me who called me in, and I was sort of specifically running a couple of the sets and overseeing things like the screen graphics and part of the drawings that these guys set up. So that's the area for that film. On other films, I will sort of control the budget for the art department, props, set deck, construction, and put together the team for that.
Okay, cool.
So it's not so much the creative role that it used to be as far as art directing went. So I am working for a designer and I'm responsible for more financial sort of aspects of it now.
Okay, so you're kind of like coordinating everyone, choosing the right people for the task, and making sure that everything kind of like is assembled and ready to go for the creative element of the production.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Charlie calls you guys up. How does that conversation go? You know, what is like, hey guys, in X amount of time.
Can you start tomorrow for a year?
No, sometimes it might be, I can't tell you what this is about.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there's a bit of a flavour of what it's, what it might be involved and when people are available and take it from there.
Okay, so you guys, I've looked at your IMDb's and Dane and Matthew in particular, like you guys have worked in a number of different roles. You know, I've seen, storyboard artist, prop maker, illustrator, concept designer. You know, does Charlie in that conversation go, this is the role you guys are going to have, or how does that kind of work?
Well, I think it's pretty organic in terms of the pecking order. I mean, it depends on the job. Obviously, if it's going to need, you probably wouldn't want to have the certain artists are going to be better for certain projects because there's a flavor that they're going to bring to it. And for me personally, I mean, when you're talking about the IMDb stuff, for me, I started off as a prop maker. Also do some special effects as well. Work with the special effects team, and then also concept art is like my bread and butter. And the way that usually works is it's a very organic process. It depends on how, the crew might need that kind of flavor. Like on Mad Max, I started off pushing a broom, literally, and then moved on to doing a lot of the hero props because that was the flavor and it really worked out. So it's quite organic, really,
So particularly on Covenant, because we were under set decoration and everything, but that turned out to be in the end quite an art department type thing in terms of the illustrations and what was designed, what was already designed, and what they wanted for the sets and everything. It was sort of strange.
Okay, so there had been some prior design work done when you came onto Covenant. Okay,
Ridley's guys.
Only Greiger's work, I suppose, would be the sort of the background of where we're heading.
Yep.
But apart from that, it was taking that, it was reinterpreting that.
Okay, cool. So what is the scope of the involvement from there? I know you said it ebbs and flows, and the roles can kind of duck and weave and turn into something else. But how long were you guys working on Covenant in total? I guess is what I'm asking in terms of months, weeks, years.
You were on for a long time.
Well, I left early,
Right.
But generally those sorts of films a year.
Okay.
In my sort of role.
Okay.
Like 9 months to a year.
Yeah, I can see your role as being more stretched out, as there's multiple touch points throughout the production phase that you need to look after and guide.
Yeah.
But you guys in the the illustration, concept design component, how does that kind of work?
What were we, 7 or 8 months?
Yeah, I
something
think
like that?
yeah, because I remember it averaging out to be because Matt and I didn't take a day off for months on end, because it was it was a huge push to get everything done, and I think it must have been 8 months, Matt.
Something like yeah. And it was a strange one because the stuff that we were doing, because it was meant to be David's drawing specifically. I guess you could have hired more artists, but then you run the risk of everything being so disparate it doesn't look like the work of the same person. So that's why the 7-day weeks and all of that sort of thing.
Okay, cool. So then I guess one question that I'm very intrigued about is what is it like coming to a project with that many movies, that many different interpretations of the Xenomorph, different directors, different flavors, and then combined with that, Giga, man. I mean, he's one of the best of the best of the best, and he'll go down in history. So, what is it like? Is it scary? Is it an honor? Is it both?
It's like, because it's Giga. We were both
because it's really funny. I think that Matt and I both have an idea about what we want to see in an alien film as well. So we, for example, we didn't draw any Deacon drawings from Prometheus.
Thank goodness.
So because there's definitely a flavor that we already have, and Matt and I are both diehard Geiger fans as well as Alien fans. We love the first 3 movies, and even the 4th one has a sweet spot. And I guess it was. Yeah, above all else, initially it was nerve-wracking because also Alien's my favorite film, and so for me it was a huge. I just wanted to impress Ridley and the team so that I could stay on the job. But then also, even as a fan, I didn't want to let guys like me down or myself down. It was initially it was terrifying, but I soon got my groove going.
And you get into that thing where the brief is the brief, and you got to hit it, and all of that sort of thing. So yeah.
So then, what was the brief?
Okay. Basically that because they're David's drawings and because of his hubris and everything and his affectations, he's supposed to be working in the classical style and that sort of thing. So that dictated that we'd be using charcoal or pen and ink and old school stuff like that. And we had some aesthetic touchstones with Rembrandt's, the shells, his style of cross-hatching, that sort of thing, and Leonardo's anatomical stuff, like all of that. We thought about like a more sort of anal retentive Victorian thing at first, and those flora and fauna ones and the sea life stuff, the botanical stuff, but in terms of the scope, what was it, 40 originally? 40 drawings?
Yeah, and then I think originally I budgeted 50 when I first started speaking to the printer.
And then it went to 100, and then it went to hundreds and that sort of thing. So although that Victorian thing would have been in character and that etching or really tight hatching style would have been right, there was no way that was achievable. So, falling back to the other ones, which were also tonally correct. So,
yeah. But also Ridley was super into the Rembrandt. Really, I mean, they're super accurate drawings, but there's a life to those lines. It's not about I mean, both Matt and I had the assumption that this guy's going to be pretty much like a printer, doing these perfect drawings. But that's not what really wanted it. Rightly so. It was meant to be David was aspiring to be looser. He wanted to be an artist where he had a free-flowing move to those illustrations, which we both managed to pick up and run with it,
Yeah, I think that's a key component of the character, isn't it? Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say the conceit was also always that he was creative and a creator. So,
Yeah, he had so much humanity in him, and that's what makes him so compelling.
I love the irony that that's the sort of thing that makes him a monster.
Yeah.
Because, when he does go off a bit, and he is actually a bit creative and he is a bit human as much as he can be. And, if he was just the robot, he wouldn't be the monster that he is. But there you go. So
I think I said to these guys before we kicked off the podcast, I watched Covenant about 2-3 weeks ago, and really for me, that's almost David's film. Like that Fassbender's performance is so spot on, and it's probably one of the strongest components of the film, I think. And I know everyone thinks the flute scene is just weird and bizarre, but I love it weird and bizarre.
They also don't realize that's Shakespeare, that scene.
Right, okay.
Is that Hamlet? I can never remember. Having said that, I'm lousy at Shakespeare, but that's specifically that one.
Right. But it was, I mean, for one, like the camera work and the CG stitching.
It's seamless,
It's stunning work there, VFX wise. But it just like it was two characters in there. It was two separate characters. He inhabited those two bodies with completely different personalities. And I think they really hit it out of the park with that. So it sounds like you guys really kind of soaked into this character of David. What was that like? Like, did you watch Prometheus on loop, or like how did you kind of go about, figuring out this character of David and what he would draw? And
well, I think a part of the appeal for Matt and I, and also to the guys who employed us, like Victor and the people that were considering us, was we sort of already had that down because we were so a part of the mythology. Like, and sure, David, absolutely, but I mean, David is a representative. I mean, David invented that xenomorph because of the conceits that were in the other Alien films, he's such a horrible Frankenstein creator kind of guy, and we sort of already had that idea anyway, so it was pretty easy for us to just pick it up. I mean, there's a lot of it in the script. I didn't like Prometheus as much as I like Covenant, but
same.
for me it was well, already knowing what David was, because in Prometheus that he's not right. Getting along. What I wouldn't say invented, but he takes what's been done and he pushes it along, that sort of thing, and it all feeds into his mania. But for me, it was also just fun to do the actor thing of creating a backstory. And like getting into, well, how does he think and why does he think this? Because he's got a terrible father figure, so he's not doing well to start with and that sort of thing. But, which is why it was cool with the scientific notation and that sort of thing to make little stories and put them in, because even if nobody ever saw it, it was still the backstory thing where it gave you like a roadmap to come up with like visual things and drawings that you wouldn't have
but it's also the
done
process
otherwise.
You've got to go through as well to get to the point you got to as well.
Yeah.
So then from there, like, okay, so you did all the drawings in David's lab,
quarters, the lab, and the scroll room. Yeah.
So what was the scope there? So that was the set drawings. That was what were all the things you were involved with on that front? Like, what were you designing the sets? Were you concepting that, or were you doing the drawings of the?
Just hardcore on the
purely the set decoration.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. So that in of itself
was a job.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We both started off doing some concepts for weapons and instruments and stuff.
I was doing furniture and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Some pretty sort of
and weapons.
Yeah. Pretty tame sort of stuff. But we knew where we wanted to be, and we sort of hammered them. I mean, there was other great artists that we work with that we like to work with. Ev Shepard, Gerhard Mosey, and Wayne Haag were upstairs doing set-related sort of drawings. You know, there was technical drawings coming from Charlie's world, and they would then give it a bit of a mood and whatever. And they'd probably be capable of doing what we're doing as well. But we were just super passionate about it, and I kind of just dug our hooks in pretty early on, and we're like, this is our job.
This is ours. We're going to take this. Cool. So like that's so interesting to me, because that part of the film, when I first saw it, it was so different to anything you'd seen in an Alien film before, really. Like, it just had this other, more organic texture. I don't think you'd ever seen parchment, let alone paper, in the Alien film. And it really hooked me in.
Just porno, mate.
Yeah. I thought it was just a different kind of, something just very new and fresh to the franchise. Like, what was Ridley's idea with doing it in that manner? I know you guys have talked about the sketching style, but like the top line kind of idea behind why to go down that kind of path for the character of David.
Did you hear anything early on, Charlie?
Yeah, you were there earlier.
I missed all those discussions.
Right.
Okay.
Because
I thought originally the scale of it, the drawings were a lot smaller.
yes,
They definitely grew in scale.
yep.
Further you got into doing the designs.
Yep. Because I think I remember talking to Victor, who was the set decorator, and because we were technically doing drawings for set dressing, we were working for Victor, and he was, you know, breaking down philosophy, and Matt and I would always go and ask him about it too, because it's how we like to work. We like to give everything a background and a purpose behind why it's there, and
function.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Matt and I are quite passionate about that. And so Victor would often say, "Listen, man, this is a civilization that is beyond commerce. It's beyond all of these conventions that we're used to, and therefore, you know, and in some ways, it's almost like that civilization went full circle and went back to really kind of, I don't know,
Tribalism, like stripping things back.
Yeah, I don't know if it was tribal, but it was, you know,
classic civilizations.
Okay, right, yeah.
It's
the Roman Empire,
like a visual touchstone. Yeah, those sort of things, and why the engineers look like Michelangelo's David,
yes,
and that sort of stuff. But
yeah, cool. So let's talk more about, you know, you three as together. I know you've spoken about you know, you're coordinating the team, but further to that, you know, is there any, like, you know, is that literally the role? Like, hey guys, we got Covenant coming up. Is there any more touchstones that you guys have together, or
and the million things that kick off from there? Yeah.
I suppose at times I might need to put the handbrakes on or the accelerator.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's coordination, because it is a bit. Films can be a bit organic, especially with their scheduling. You can expect things to happen on a certain day, and sometimes they don't. Yeah. So it's totally understanding what these guys have to do and trying to get into their headspace about what I think it's going to take to do it, you know, is part of what I've got to sort of monitor.
Right.
But, you know, hopefully I won't be nagging them for anything. But, you know, it is part of it's caressing to get the best performance.
Yeah.
Well.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
But when you're talking about philosophy earlier of characters and how that sort of evolves in films, you know, that's something which I try to take in as well, and then drip feed it as needed, like what Victor was doing.
Yeah.
To get everybody to work in the same direction.
Yeah. Because Charlie, you work pretty close with production designers usually as well, right? Yeah. And so that means that you're then sort of interpreting their vision as well?
Totally interpreting their vision and keeping that, I suppose, yes, keeping that the way they want it.
Yep.
I suppose Max was a good example of where the designer actually wrote most of the characters' backstories.
Yeah.
And knowing those, I could, depending on what people were working on, I could tell them the backstory of why this truck is in this tribe and what it does and where it's going.
Okay.
You know, that's all they need to know. You know, if I've got a mechanic working on a truck, I want them in that headspace.
Yeah.
I don't want them knowing what the other guys are doing.
Yeah. So there's a team management aspect to your role, like, you know, keeping focus, making sure everyone has the information at their disposal to do their job, and knowing the moments to pick when you have some higher up information, knowing what to feed down to these guys?
Definitely you're a filter of information.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've got to be diligent with it as well.
Does that change?
You don't want everybody to be a boss. It is ultimately what the best way to run a job.
Mm. Were you going to say something, Matt?
Oh, I was just going to ask, things change a little with script revisions and stuff like that, I guess, but have you been on any projects where things have really gone? Because usually by the time you're into it, you've got a roadmap to,
There was a recent film I don't really want to talk about.
You don't have to name it, but yeah.
The problem with that, sometimes you will get major problems, and on that film it was very late decisions, and which created a lot of problems.
And is that stuff that comes from the script changing, or just a general change of direction?
Suppose decisions not being made in the manner they should be, and that give us enough time to actually make something happen.
Execute. Right. It's interesting to hear you guys talk about these behind the scene things, because as a fan, I've made a couple of short films, I've directed a few music videos, nothing insane, but it's interesting to hear about, the project management side of things. I think that's what a lot of people forget about. These are $100 million, $200 million juggernauts.
It's not always about the money. It's about the money's one thing, but it's the number of people that you've got.
Well, yeah,
because you as you scale up to more and more people, you need more and more intermediate managers as well.
Okay,
you can't just have 200 carpenters and one construction manager.
That's why independent films can be pretty fun too, because
they kind of work on small things as well, and they working with 10 people, you can get just as much satisfaction as working with 400.
But it's a different mindset, I'm sure.
But there's a funny misconception, I think, about the money, especially, and like you're saying.
Not necessarily. I think when I say that budget is also about the scope. The number of people, as you said. $100 million film is going to have that many more people involved than a 10 million.
But you know how people say, it's a big budget thing. How could they do this and that? And why did they penny pinch, or why couldn't they go all the way, or something like that? And what I'm getting at is, okay, if your budget is $100,000, sure, every cent makes a difference and that sort of thing. But if you amplify that up to $100 million, if you blow out by the same percentage, you're blowing out by hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars because of the scope and the amount of people and all of that. So it's not that things get any more lax or whatever. So I just often find that's a funny sort of conception about that these are different beasts, these tiny little ones and the really big ones. But like I say, the same sort of things apply all the way up the scale.
Yeah, sure. I mean, a misstep on one of those is $5 million, or something, a massive amount of money. So I completely understand that. I guess what I was kind of getting at is I'd imagine on a smaller scale film, your scope of work might be a little more lateral. Like you might be doing a bit of this, a bit of that.
Oh yeah, definitely broadens. Yeah.
Whilst, or maybe on something like Covenant, you guys are, doing, your function is primarily this. So what do you guys prefer working on? Do you prefer do you prefer bigger films? Do you prefer smaller films? What's your preference? Or do you like both for different reasons? And why do you like both for different reasons?
I kind of like all. I mean, I've worked on musicals, and that was fun. And there's nothing I've turned down, and there's always something you can get out of it, especially with what I do now, which isn't as much creative, it's a bit more logistical. Sort of seeing not only the script, but potentially where it's going to be made and who's part of it. That sort of excites me.
Yeah, I've been surprised at doing smaller films how much I love doing them. I just did a little film called Necromancer with the same guys who made Wormwood. The zombie movie, which I'm actually in. I'm one of the zombies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, bites one of the characters' hands. But
No makeup.
no, I didn't need any. But I had a ball, man, and I think you know what it comes down to: awesome crews. When you've got working with good people and it's fun, you know, I've done big movies that I've found really toxic, done small movies where you even, you know, you take a pay cut and you love it to death and you put yourself into it as well. And it's because of the people you work with and you get along with them, you form a camaraderie and a shorthand as well, which is critical in what we do. And man, you end up loving it.
What do you prefer, Matt?
I don't have a preference either. I love it all. And even on big stuff, you know, I'll go from sci-fi to a period film to I work equally in animation features as live action ones and, you know, storyboards to concepts to sets to costume, whatever, just character. Yeah, and it's all fun. Character and story to me anyway. So
keeps it interesting.
Matt did actually Lego Batman, which I obviously didn't work on, but I loved his work from there. I found that, you know, because Matt's style, I mean, he loves animation and the care and attention that's paid in bringing animation to life in a way that makes it look good and gives it a gravitas. You know, Matt is so conscious of those things, and his drawings for Lego Batman, which is not necessarily a film I would jump at to work on. By the way, Charlie also worked on the Ninjago movie, right?
Ninjago,
that's it. 2 Lego guys here, man. I'm out of the club.
I love those Lego movies, man. I love them.
But ironically, I wasn't on the animation side.
Right.
Oh yeah, the live action.
I was on the live action side.
Need it all.
So what did you do on Lego Batman?
Concepts mostly, mainly set design and that sort of thing, and eventually building stuff in digital Lego and sort of thing.
Matt, can you talk us through? I reckon the listeners will really like some of the stuff that you did, that comes to memory, which is the cars. You know, he's got his car selection of vehicles. That he does.
the rotisserie, that Batmobile rotisserie.
What was it? What are some of the Easter eggs you snuck in there, and what?
There's every Batmobile ever, and you know, down below I tried to put the Batamaran in because I hadn't seen a Batamaran. But it was just tons of stuff. My favourite thing was the one that got cut out that was in all the ads, which was the indoor swimming pool, because he would have the stupidest, most extreme swimming pool ever. So it's like 4 infinity pools draining into 4 more, joined by moats into the main pool and that sort of thing. And you know, it's all like the Hearst Castle, and because, you know, that's the sort of character he is and that sort of thing. Again, I did a bit of character stuff, and it all comes back to story and character. That's the linchpin, and whether you're boarding a whole sequence or you're doing one key frame as a concept painting, it still comes from the same source.
Very cool. So I guess this is a question I wanted to ask you. I'd sort of preempted you guys before the podcast. Is you know, some of the, I looked you guys up on IMDb obviously, and you guys have a lot of different roles in some of these films. You know, storyboard artist, concept artist, illustrator, designer, art director. You know, I'd love you guys to talk about those different things and the different functions of those, and you know, what's step 1 and what's step 15, you know, the process.
Well, Charlie's gone
man.
all that way, so from one end to the other.
Yeah.
So do you start
I
off?
started pretty extreme. I started just as a runner in the art department, and I'd just finished interior design, and I worked for free, and it was back in the days when you could work for free.
What year was that, Charlie?
When were you born, Dane?
84.
Yeah, about the same year. It was 84. And I sort of, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I always had a love of film due to my mother used to take me to films at the old cinema in Double Bay, and they were influential films. Yeah,
fantastic.
You know, there was a French animation called Fantastic Planet, I think it was.
Oh, nice! Yeah,
you know, it tripped me out when I was a kid.
Me too. My dad took me to that because it was, you know, it's a cartoon, it's animated. And
yeah, you know, and just seeing that, it sort of blew my mind, and I remember it. And another film I remember at the same cinema years later, when I realised about comedy and how pacing worked on a film. I didn't realise I wanted to be a filmmaker, but was Blazing Saddles. you know, and it was about the joke and the pun, and there's something where I started to cross over there, going, people actually make this, and people let me enjoy it. And then the one which sort of really blew my mind was 2001 at the Old Academy Twin in Paddington. And I remember seeing that, not understanding a word of it, or, you know, the meaning of the whole thing. But walking out of there going, someone made that model, someone made or thought about how that set rotated. And I think that's what hooked me. And all those years later, I started working on films, and that's where I went from. But I started in a role where it was at the very bottom of an art department, a bit like Dane, and then I sort of found what I liked the most and challenging. Because I did work as a props buyer on films like Babe, and then started art directing on television, and then found my way into films.
Yeah, very cool.
I sort of talking about the journey, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's what the questions evolved into.
Yeah. I started off, I just wanted to make monsters forever. Like, I knew that I wanted to make them. I didn't know what that meant, if it was to draw them or to make them, sculpt them, whatever. But I knew I wanted to be in film, and so I got into the industry when I was about 22 or 23, and I started off pushing a broom in the prop workshop and special effects as well. And I could push the broom like nobody's business.
Oh,
man.
yeah.
I had the zeal.
You had
of
the technique.
Yeah. Basically, I just wanted to be employed again. You know, my number one question when I first started, I went to every person that I met that I thought had a bit of constitution to them, and I said, "What do you do when films aren't happening?" And they say, some of them would say, "I panic." Some of them would say, "Oh, I've just got my finger in many pies." And basically, I sort of deduced that, you know, to be employed in the film industry, first of all, you have to be likable. Don't be a prick, you know, number one. And number two, enthusiasm for your job. You know, like, there's heaps of people. I mean, look, it's the industry of almost, and there's a lot of people with, you know, that are a bit jaded by it sometimes, and I found it really easy. Like, I love talking to these people. I love talking to Charlie and Matt. You know, like, when I first met, I was such a fan of his work, and all my peers, I really enjoyed their stuff, and so I managed to get into what I was doing. As a concept artist, I remember actually on Fury Road, I wasn't a concept artist, but I would draw on the
I got you
walls.
to draw one thing.
Yes.
Your first drawing.
Which was?
Fury Toad.
Fury Toad. It was a frog. Yeah.
It was a frog as Mel Gibson.
Yeah. Yeah. And we had these flats up, you know, dividing the workshop. And I used to take the grease from the cars that we just stripped back and just paint stuff on the wall with my hands, with my gloves. And then it was Laurie Fain, who went on to be an art director on Paradise Lost, who then got me in to do concept art, which I was way out of my league, because, like, those guys are just so, I'd not used Photoshop properly up until that point.
Cool.
So I had to learn on the job, like, learn or die.
Thrown in the deep end.
Yes, yeah.
Dane's a very fast learner, though.
Yeah, and so and that's where I sort of ended up. And now I jump around as much as I can. Like, on some films, I manage to start at the start and finish when it finishes, because I can jump into the prop shop and, you know, then go on set and do SFX stuff. And because I love it, I love being there every minute, and I'm happy to be happy about it. So.
But did you obviously drew a lot in high school, or what was your journey pre to sort of even the film industry, you know?
Yeah, I was always an okay illustrator, but I sort of got scared off it by learning my fundamentals. You know, the art teachers were like, you have to learn shape, you have to learn line weights, which I scoffed at them, and I said, bro, I just want to draw someone with their head cut off. Yeah. That's all I care about.
Chainsaw.
You have to learn to draw the head, yeah.
Exactly. But then years later, man, I needed that stuff, and I've learned to love my fundamentals. So I'm still a huge fan of other artists. I think they're brilliant, and I pay very close attention to what they do, as I'm sure Matt does as well. He's so well versed in all these other artists. But I sort of focus in, like, I have a bit of a strength when it comes to texture. I really like playing with very textural images, and it's something I'm passionate about, and it works well. You know, designers like it. They like seeing that information, and also I'm relatively quick with it. I'm not the quickest, but I can handle it.
Pump it out.
Yeah.
Cool. How about you, Matt? Like, can you give us your spiel and your, you know, as those early years as well? I'd love to hear about that.
It was similar sort of thing. I'd always drawn, and since I got old with pencil and that sort of thing, and grew up on Ray Harryhausen and you know, all the good creature stuff and monster stuff. And I was a kid in the glorious rubber days of the 80s, you know, monster movies and that sort of thing. I went into advertising because that was the job at the time and that sort of thing, and eventually went freelance as an illustrator, and I was always doing character design and that stuff. But eventually I got a bit jack of that and said because I'd always loved movies to bits, and, you know, I loved all the extras behind the scenes, like everything I could possibly soak up, and, you know, those box set things and all of that. And then I thought I really should pull my finger out now and get into it. And there were two people that I was going to call in Australia, like visual directors, and they were George Miller and Alex Proyas. And Alex gave me my first job in the industry because he'd seen comics that I'd done. So that was cool. I started as like a junior storyboard artist and that sort of thing. So
cool.
yeah, and then branched out into concept and all of those other things. So yeah.
Well, this might be an appropriate time to pick your brains on Alex Proyas, because Dark City is one of my favorite films. Not many people. We actually screened it at the Ritz earlier this year because it's 20 years since it came out.
Yeah.
It was the theatrical cut, but, you know, so be it. It was still a really cool experience. And I think that film, I don't know, it just has a special place for me.
I love it to bits. Unfortunately, I started with him the film.
Yeah, you did Garage Days, right?
Sorry?
The was it Garage Days?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
But I would have loved to work on Dark
so
City.
were you a fan? Like, did you see Dark City in the cinema?
Well, like I
cool.
say, you know, and you could tell, like, Alex was a visual guy.
Yeah.
And part of that is, you know, getting concept artists in and all of that sort of stuff.
And The Crow as well. I just want to point out.
Yeah,
The Crow.
absolutely.
Loves The Crow.
The first DVD I bought was Dark City.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
There you go. Yeah.
So, I mean, so you've had an ongoing relationship with him. So how did that relationship form? And, you know, tell us about working with him. You know, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like I say, you'd seen the comics and that sort of thing. You know, he can. He's a passionate guy. Is that how we say it too? Yeah. And look, you know, there were some things working on these movies and being privy to behind the scenes. Or actually, I was. Did you ever work at the pub at Paddo, the old production company?
No, I've been in there for meetings, but never worked.
Right.
Mystery Clock?
Mystery Clock. Yeah. Because they had
The old
this old pub.
Dunkirk Hotel, wasn't it?
Was that it? Yeah, just down from the not the Orpheum, the Chevelle. Thanks. And they had the up where we had lunch. They had the big gargoyle from Dark City and that sort of thing looking over us. But I was directly under Alex's office. So when there were certain calls with certain studio heads insisting on little things that they wanted, or it was all off and that sort of thing, there would be silt sort of raining down on me sometimes, that sort of thing. But it's funny being, you know, completely on the other side like that. And yeah. But you know, and he had certain things that he preferred, like you talk about speed and that sort of thing, and I was surprised that he wanted me to do mostly, you know, keep going with TV commercial, like advertising level boards that were all rendered and that sort of thing, because he felt that, you know, that was the right sort of application for what I was doing and that sort of stuff, you know, as opposed to thumbnail dipped in target amount and that sort of, you know, so you cast there as well. Different artists were doing different styles. Some people like it to be all the same and that sort of thing. Other directors are fine with, they can see through the style, because for storyboarding in particular, style isn't the most important thing, like technique or whatever. It's, do you understand cinematic language? Can you, like the director doesn't want to be you know, directors are different. Sometimes you're a monkey with a pencil. Other times you're like, here's the script, off you go.
Right.
And sometimes like George Miller is start out broad, riff on this sequence, do me a bunch of different sort of things, and then we narrow it down and he gets more and more specific. And another part of it too is you should be thinking in the director's mode, like the sort of language they employ and the sort of tone that they go for, the sort of moves, the sort of, do you... some guys like to move the camera an awful lot to get that sense of urgency or whatever if it's an action sequence. Others like to do it with cutting and the frame. So, you shouldn't just be doing what you like, but it's part of the storytelling too, to be, in that frame of mind. So, yeah, it's interesting the way that goes. And as I just said, Alex and George were very different that way, even though they're both known for the visuals.
And it's really important what Matt's talking about, because that really affects what I do as well. And like those storyboards are so important to the way I might be breaking down a script or breaking down a scene, and knowing exactly if it's been issued and the director's approved it. I know exactly what they're looking at. I know they might be a bit wider, but that's it. That's the scale.
Lenses too. If you're wide, that's 50 more cars in the background.
Oh, exactly.
That sort of thing. Yeah.
Right.
But talking about George and the way he storyboards, like the Mad Max boards for Fury Road, they're still locked in my brain. And when I see the film, I know exactly what all those storyboards were. For a long time when we were developing that, I'd started in 2002 on that film.
Wow.
So, and I know just about every board in that film. And there was no script. The whole journey of Fury Road was storyboards.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't until the very end, by that time I'd left it to start on another film, that there was actually dialogue starting to come into it.
Yeah.
It was purely a visual.
Sorry.
It was purely a visual film.
Yeah, and George's musical sense with the mountains and the troughs and all of that sort of thing, you could see that happening in the boards as well.
Right.
And great people like Mark Sexton boarding for him and that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, going back to Mark Sexton, you didn't draw on Babe, did you?
No.
So Babe was another film which George didn't direct. It was Chris Noonan. But that was another film where the storyboards were exactly what you saw on screen.
Okay.
And it was so important for that sort of film technically, knowing exactly where the animals were, what the background was, what everything was.
But
the only thing you were swapping out was a bit of dressing, which was getting finalised, but that was pretty much it all the way through.
Okay.
That's a different kind of budgeting too. There's all the stuff you deal with, but there's also the pre sort of thing where it's so much less, it's less expensive to be coming up with scenes and redoing them and just have a few guys drawing on pieces of paper than, getting further down the line and where, every change, makes the budget go up and down and sideways. And so that's a very different sort of part of that. But, and you can see how it pays off with George's stuff for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I want to go quickly back to a project that you mentioned, Paradise Lost.
Can I just tell one? One Mad Max story was that I didn't work on Fury Road to my eternal chagrin, but I did. I have worked for George a few times and that sort of thing. And when I came in on Happy Feet at the very start, which was like 2002 or 3 or something,
it was. Yeah, a bit earlier. 2002, we were trying to do Fury Road and Happy Feet was still going on.
Yeah, but I remember coming into the office because there was the meeting room upstairs and they had all of the boards stretching around the whole office and they had, a couple of the models and, the big rig and that sort of thing. And I was like, I started to look because my God, here we go. And I started to look and I thought, you know what, this is fantastic. This is back in the vein of Mad Max 2, So I'm not going to do it. I'm going to save myself. I will not look. I will not spoil it for myself because I'm going to be on Happy Feet down there and that sort of thing. And then how many fucking years after that until it finally came out? Goddamn, because for a long time we thought, will it get made, won't it get made? And budget rescheduling. And
the first time we tried in 2002, Happy Feet sort of held us up because that went so over time.
Yeah.
And then when we built the trucks and the bikes and the weapons in 2009, 2010.
Back in Villawood, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that was after
Happy Feet 2 was also holding us up.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
We had to put it on hold and we mothballed everything and put it away. And I was there when we packed it up in Broken Hill. And it was a really sad feeling because there was a chance it wasn't ever going to get back up. Because even in Namibia in 2003, they had already built vehicles, right?
No, we built, that all got trashed.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was all the way back then. Like, I think Broken Hill gets all the publicity and stuff. But Namibia the first time around.
Yes.
God, what a shame if that had never been made, huh?
Well, it was worth the wait in the end.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So,
Sorry,
no,
I totally took
I love
over
it.
then and
I
it
love
just-
it. Give me
I had
more.
to get that
more
one in.
stories, more stories.
But Paradise Lost.
Because I remember falling in love with Alex Proyas and really excited for that, return back to that kind of more, let's call it sci-fi fantasy. It's a very different, like Dark City's obviously a noir and Paradise Lost was going to be another beast. But what was it like? Because you worked on that as well, didn't you, Dane? What was that process like? And tell me more because I find that very interesting. Because Bradley Cooper was going to be cast in that, right?
Yeah. I saw a screen test.
Yeah, cool.
Well, they had a body scan for him as well.
Yeah, I still got that one.
In the archives.
You think the Polaroids are unbecoming, boy, the body, the
3D.
the scans are the worst. And
Yeah.
like the poor guy too, because he was in between gigs and stuff, so he wasn't working out, I guess, at the time. And so he's in his little bike shorts and that sort of thing. But so that was pretty funny. But.
That's great. That's great.
But yeah, that was in 2011. And I actually, when everyone went to Namibia for Fury Road, I'd literally just started on Paradise Lost with Owen Patterson was a designer who designed the Matrix films. And I always wanted to work for him. That was the first time I did. And I had to turn down Colin, the production designer on Fury Road, to stay with Paradise Lost because I didn't know if it was really going to happen again.
Yep.
You're just too popular for your own good.
Also, my wife was with me on Fury Road as well, and then we both moved on to Paradise Lost too. And so we'd sort of dug ourselves into a happy little spot, and I was super excited to be doing concept art. And also, I'm a huge fan of Alex Proyas as well, so to get to work with him was just awesome. Yeah.
I nearly wound up on Paradise Lost.
Did you really? Man, what did you end up doing instead?
Cloud Atlas.
Oh, yeah, right.
Right. Gotcha. But so Paradise Lost,
Like, what was it? It was going to be mainly green screen, right? Or what was the aesthetic of that film going to be?
it
Or
was
was it still
everything.
forming? Was it still forming?
there is a cut of the film that exists in previs form.
What?
Because it got that far. God knows
got
how many
that
millions
far?
they spent on it. Yeah,
Did they really? I didn't realize it even went into production. I thought it stalled at
Well,
pre-production.
it
It
was
was in
technically
pre-production.
pre-production,
But they
but
just-
because it was
right.
an animated movie, and this was something I never understood because I get that people like effects facilities, for examples, lowball so that they can get the job, and then you try to say, oh well, this is different now, but. And studios they want to try to make it for that much. But Paradise Lost was an Avatar movie in terms of its scope. And, you've got angels fighting demons and they're flying around and all of that sort of thing. Yes, there was going to be a whole lot of CG, and how could there not be? And it's the sort of story where if you did it without the green screen and all of that sort of stuff, blue screen, green screen, I think there was even a bit of red. In those, little
Because they did build a couple of props and stuff.
But and even in terms of the CG, the way they planned it out, there were people storyboarding certain sequences that were best done that way.
Mm-hmm.
There were people doing regular CG previs for flying things or whatever. And
Matte
then there were...
paintings.
Sorry?
Matte paintings as well.
Yep. It was full on. And
it was
the
mad.
third bit was what we called crappy cap, which was a rough and dirty mocap that we were just on the Fox lot in one of those industrial units sort of thing, and downstairs they sort of covered the concrete with a bunch of those sort of spongy sort of interlocking pieces and put sensors and stuff so that they can do quick and dirty mocap, and you know, they'd splice it all, and it was working really well, and that's why there's a whole cut of the movie all the way along.
Owen has it. He told me.
Now
the internet knows.
I don't know who Owen is, but let's go visit him after this.
That was I started off. I was doing props and weapons on it, but I managed to do. I just love hellish things anyway, so I just kept drawing hellish things on the side.
Your bag, right?
And I eventually got to do the Angel of Death, which I was super proud of because I just thought that, man, that is so me.
I was super jealous because I kept trying to get to the demons, and they're like, Matt, more angels.
Yeah. But we did pretty almost 12 months on and off, really, because I had a hiatus in the middle, and then we went back onto it. But it was just disappointing that it didn't happen.
And Gods of Egypt has a lot of stuff that is sort of
repurposed.
That sort of like ideas and things that was sort of, you know.
And Dracula too. There was a bit of year one. You remember when Alex was going to do Dracula year one?
Well, he was doing that for. He was working on that and like Mask of the Red Death and that sort of thing for many years, just on and off and that sort of stuff. Because I was doing stuff for Alex for I think like three or 4 years before Garage Days and iRobot and stuff. Because a lot of TVCs and in short films and that sort of stuff. But so that stuff was kicking around even back then, and you know, some of these things pick up, some of them go sideways, like you know, Gods of Egypt happening, you know, because the other one didn't go up. You know, it's all part of the course, I guess.
Very cool
about it.
Oh, well, you know, that film always intrigued me, and I was always very disappointed I never get to see it.
Yeah,
but,
me too.
It seems like you guys are as well.
Yeah.
What happens with so something just you know, what happens with those images? Like, you're super proud of the Angel of Death. Do you get to take that home? Like, do you get your own copy, or how does that even work?
It's deleted off your computer, isn't it, Dane?
On the record or off the record?
We can edit. You know,
no.
modern day tools.
Look, it's a weird thing, man, because you need, your next job is based on your last job, sort of. You know, like when Alien Covenant came out, and you know, and I went into interview with for Pac Rim. I actually didn't take any alien stuff, and even the designer was like, well, where's all your alien stuff? And I was like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about it. Because most of it was traditional artwork, you know.
But there's some stuff you can't show because, you know, it might be years until the picture comes out and that sort of stuff. And animation, they're you know, Nazis about that. And you know, I still haven't, you know, you can't ever have it sometimes. Yes, you can have it other times, but
it's like a draw.
Yeah, it's weird.
Well, generally after a film's been released, they're a bit more lax. But
Okay.
up until that
not
point,
always.
you know, it's fair enough. It's the studio's property, or
Right.
Stage
Yeah,
owner.
you did it for
producer's
them.
property.
But that might be years later, you know, because you know, you Covenant hadn't come out when Pac Rim was getting going.
It's bad luck, yeah, because Charlie and I both did a film in China at the start of last year. True?
This time last year.
Yeah, this time last year. There you go. Fire up. And I don't know if that film will ever get made or finished. Who knows? But I did like 200 drawings of, which I'm super proud of, but I'm reticent to share it. I mean, until I know that the project's dead and buried, you know, it's kind of like remember when Tim Burton was going to do Superman and the concept art for that came out years later? You know,
Nick Cage.
That's right. Yeah, with his
the fluorescent
Love it. Stuff. Yeah.
Where's that?
Well,
movie?
I can use the Dark Crystal 2 stuff for many years, and like when it was finally said no, it's absolutely gone and dead, because that thing had, I don't know, 5 or 6 iterations, like different directors coming on and off and that sort of thing. So yeah, when they finally said no, that's it, it's gone, sort of thing. That's when I started.
So that's popped up again now, hasn't it?
That's a different thing. It's not the sequel, it's a prequel.
Yeah, I think they just bailed on that story because they turned it into the comic.
Yeah, story, and they didn't change any of the problems with the script at all.
Yeah.
Charlie, you mentioned Cloud Atlas earlier, and I know you've done a number of features with the Wachowskis. Can you talk a little bit about working with them and the journey and the relationship over those films that you've done, which is Cloud Atlas, Jupiter Ascending, Matrix Revolutions.
Yeah, on the 2 Matrix films, I was just an art director.
Okay.
So I was looking after sets and sort of beats. On 2 and 3, Revolutions and Reloaded. I was also looking after the game. We were making the game at the same time.
The game, the Michael Douglas film?
No, the game.
Enter the Matrix.
Oh,
Enter
the game.
Matrix, yeah.
Oh, the game.
That was a cool
game.
game.
That game rules.
So that was all part of what we were doing when we were making the films.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, but working with the Wachowskis back then, they were really quiet, but they were very open to being approached and would answer questions. And that was another film we've talked about, A Guy Called Owen, and Owen Patterson was designing that. So I was working with him. So it was a very easy team. When I worked on Cloud Atlas, that was with a designer called Hugh Baitup, who was Owen's supervising art director. And I went off to Germany and worked on the Wachowski unit. And there was another design team that was working for Tom Twyker. So it was like a German team and an English team.
That's right. It was a co-production. I remember that now.
Yeah. So it was all one office, 2 departments, and then we were shooting 2 different units at the same time in different parts of the world.
Wow.
Logistically, very problematic.
Mm-hmm. No doubt.
Yeah. So
with 18 stories or whatever is in Cloud Atlas, 7.
Yeah, six stories.
6 stories. I mean,
with a cast that had to rotate and change characters.
Yeah, and feed back into other stories. Yeah, that must have been a very complicated project.
A very complicated script to read. So especially with those sorts of stories, and with a couple of other scripts I've read where they're broken into those sort of funny jump cut worlds, sometimes it's easy to read them as single stories. So the first time I read Cloud Atlas, I read 6 different stories, and then I read the script because there was just no way you would have put that together just reading the script alone.
Yeah, they changed the script, didn't they? Because the book's written just story 1, story 2, story 3, story 4, and then the movie they interwove them.
It's all interwoven into the stories,
Yeah,
and they changed one of the stories in the book as well.
Yeah,
quite a bit.
Did that come in at script stage or in editing?
The
intercutting between.
No, that was always at script stage.
Okay. Yep.
So, but luckily they were able to draw the 6 stories out.
Yeah.
Mm. And then
cool.
Put the whole script back together. So it was always script, scene 1 to 200 or whatever it was.
Yep.
But they were jumping all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And then Jupiter Ascending was another film.
Yep.
Which again, they're very collaborative. They're very focused on what they want, and they're very quiet. So they're quite easy.
I like that movie more than most people do, I think.
Jupiter Ascending.
Yeah.
The original script I read for that, was an epic. It was great and should have been 2 films.
Okay.
But I think at the time with studio politics that were going on, it ended up being what it is, which I think was probably half the film it should have been.
It's tough. I feel like it's tough these days if it doesn't have an IP attached to it to get an epic, 2 movie, I don't know the budget of Jupiter Ascending. I'm sure it was 100 million, 200 million, somewhere in that ballpark. Like that was a big production.
It was, and it did have the seeds for more stories to explore.
Yeah, it definitely did.
So, but it just wasn't received quite as well as it should have been.
Cool. So I'd love to talk to you guys about a book you have coming out. We talked a lot about Covenant earlier on, but tell us more about this book you guys have coming out. It sounds really, really interesting. And where's my copy?
After we get out.
You can pre-order it.
I will.
That's true. Yeah, you can. Well, first of all, I guess we should say we haven't actually seen what the interior of the book looks like. Basically, the trick was that Fox owns all the images in the first place, right? And a lot of people don't sort of understand how the licensing works. But when we're employed by a production, they own what we do at the time, and that's that, which we're totally cool with. We get it. We're familiar with that practice because it's what the film industry is like,
day.
Yeah, absolutely. And but what I had to I took it upon myself to get into Fox's business and try to get this thing happening, because on Covenant, man, every day people would just come up to us and just go, "Oh my God, you guys did those drawings.
Got to do a book.
You have to do a book." Yeah. Exactly. And so I actually put a pitch document together at work while on Covenant, and I emailed one of the producers just out of nowhere. I'd not met them before, and said, "Hey, maybe you guys are interested in doing a book." I put together a bit of a pitch document that details David's arc from his, botanist, amateur botanist kind of mindset all the way through to his space madness. Like they were kind of open to it. And then I totally bullshitted, and I just said, "Well, look, I'll be in LA in about 2 weeks if you want to have a meeting about it." They go, "Oh, sure, absolutely." So I booked a ticket and went over there, and I ended up having a meeting. I met with the head of marketing, digital marketing, the head of social media, all these guys. And Matt and I ended up getting more work out of it. We did some stuff for the marketing stuff all the way through. And then eventually the book came around. They got us in touch with the publishers. And it was a tricky thing because they sent us a contract that basically was like, we own all the drawings. And when Matt and I were kind of like, well, no.
That's not, we can't be held, those sort of standard contracts where we hold you liable for absolutely everything, and we're like, well, hang on a second.
Yeah.
We can't be, because
we don't own it.
That's right, and we did it.
We can't sign away the
as
rights.
a contract thing for Fox and the movie in the first place. So
we basically renegotiated it in so that we, in many ways, we're a curator of the stuff, which I think was a smart way to do it on their part, because that not only are we from the pedigree of the film, but we conceived those illustrations. Like there was no one picture that we were told, "Oh, can you draw that?" We were coming up with everything, and we were entrusted to make sure that it was a part of the world, and the internal logic was. We were holding each other accountable to it anyway. Like they were in good hands in that sense. And so when it came to doing the book, we were basically telling the publishers, like, man, it just makes the most sense that we go through this journey with Dave. Again, we don't actually know if that's how it was cut in the end. We supplied it in that order.
Yeah, because the cool thing was that the way the story played out, those scenes that we worked on formed a 3-act structure anyway. We had the progression from David's quarters and everything being innocent, and I'm a scientist, I'm a botanist, all of that sort of thing, to the anatomical stuff that you're not quite sure just then, to the lab and that sort of thing where you're like, hang on a minute, and their dissections and all of that sort of stuff, and it getting pretty evil, to the final payoff with what's happened to Shaw and that sort of thing. And the same thing with all of the notations starting out all very seemingly innocent, and then hang on, it's not quite right. And then it progresses to pretty much nothing at the end because he's gone off the deep end. So it actually works pretty perfectly for an arc and in a book. So
it's got an inherent narrative
it will
to
be,
it kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were really precious about how they were going to be represented, but the truth is, because we weren't employed by the publishers, we didn't really have a say in how that works or looks. So there was other designers organizing things, I guess. So we took actual photographs of the stock paper that we used to use for to print the images out, and I sent them over to them. Whether or not they felt that was artistically appropriate for this venture, who knows,
And to be fair, they did tell us at one point that, yes, we did pay for the license.
Yes.
So we don't have to pay you, but we'd love you to be involved in that sort of thing. So we just did everything we could from our side of the fence.
Yeah.
So in terms of the what you've supplied to them, is that purely images, or have you supplied some text and captions, or what?
The ones that we'd done for the images initially for the movie.
Yeah, I think we even went so far, because I think we had some of the text in normal, because some of the handwriting was hard to read.
That wouldn't make sense in this context. Any repetition or whatever, because a lot of the stuff that we did, like there was, like, for instance, in the lab, there were so many pieces of art that a lot of them were what we called Frankenstein, and where just to fill it out in the background, out of focus, you photo bash it and upside down and back to front and that sort of thing, and you might renew some text. And obviously, when it comes to a book, you can't do that, or a gallery or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when's that coming out, guys?
Officially September,
Yeah.
Okay.
but
September.
it's launching at San Diego, and we're going over to do a little signing. And
Very exciting. Cool.
Yes.
yeah,
Really cool. When you guys jet setting for that? That's coming up soon,
a few
right?
weeks.
Yeah, and the 14th of July we'll
Fun.
leave, and then
Fun.
it's gonna be cool.
Good stuff.
Yes.
Oh well, I think that's a pretty good place for us to cap it off there.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thanks so much for inviting us, man.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Seriously, thank you so much, guys. It's an honor speaking to you guys. It's you guys are my heroes. You've worked with some of my heroes. We'd love to have you guys back on any time. And thanks so much once again.
Thank you. It was great fun.
Yeah, good stuff. So, guys, you can check this episode out on Apple Podcasts or YouTube, and we'll be back next week. Don't you worry. And hopefully we can do more of these kind of industry-based episodes because for me, I love doing these episodes, and hopefully you guys find some value out of them as well. So we'll see you next time. Thanks again, guys. Cheers.
See you later.